The downside of only having one bullet is you're reluctant to give warning shots.
Yeah, that's true.
Excited from going to yours, this one, or my church.
Her. Well, now it's right here. Got coffee. I didn't notice.
Actually, I finally got
Steve,
my
the one
car
on the
straightened
left.
around. I got all those. I got
Steve,
40,000 points.
Really? 40,000?
the coffee on the left is a little stronger than the coffee on the right.
This is stronger.
And this peppermint mocha.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. They got the blueberry crumble. They got the pumpkin spice.
Oh, I did not like this one.
And they got, what was that?
Get Go has a maple pecan, which is really good.
I just knew it was Speedway because of the design, not because it said it. Because I noticed it said it after I guessed it. That's
Okay.
Pastor Al,
Hmm.
remember that question that I asked you at the radio about Jesus when he was a baby?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that means that Jesus was a baby genius.
You can say that.
He was an omnipotent baby genius.
I don't know what that
Omniscient
means.
baby genius.
Brilliant and
Omniscient meaning all knowing.
I know what omniscient means, but you said
Omnipotent, all powerful.
well, duh.
Omni, all potent.
potentate.
Good video for now.
There we go.
Neil, can you put some sauerkraut in this?
Yes.
Who's that?
I love sauerkraut.
That was on the picture I showed you.
Oh. I didn't see it. Was it in that bag?
On the
Yeah,
left.
that was in
I couldn't read the bag.
Snow Floss.
The good one.
Snow floss.
That's the brand name.
Why did some sauerkraut on there?
Trying to think where my grandma Ann was from. She was like born in America. Her sister was born on a ship coming over Czechoslovakia, Romania, something like that.
Everybody has like some type of relative, like an aunt or an uncle, or a grandma, or mom and dad named Aunt.
She made a goulash that was just like unbelievable. Oh boy. Goulash. It was like,
That would be similar to a goulash.
yeah,
This,
where they use cabbage, they'll use pork, beef, lamb, chicken.
Then there's some people who call it chili, like chili mac.
Mhm.
chili. Chili mac is so much, I mean,
Right.
chili is so much better than chili mac. Sorry, but that's just facts.
She would use, let's see, she'd actually get the leaf cabbage and just cut the cabbage in wide strips. You'd have ground beef with lamb. You'd have
Honey, I
peppers,
had your
onions.
cup on set.
Oh, I didn't see it.
It's in behind the copy.
She put barley, lentils,
One for you, one for me.
Celery, carrot.
I didn't see that, I'm just fading the trip.
My sister working up there at the Regina up there where all the nuns are at. You know, all those people, they're from like, you know, the middle, middle Europe, Southern Europe and all that. Slovenia and all that. Slovenia, that's where she's from. Slovakia.
So are you looking for a new church? Looking for a new church? No, their church. Yeah, eventually. Yeah, we're looking for something like that.
Wait, Pastor Lutz?
They're trying to relocate their building at their church.
Why?
They're kind of reached the end of their, how much they can span.
I feel like being in the ghetto.
Looking around,
They're not using it.
I know,
but,
Lakewood's not a ghetto.
I know.
I've gone all through. East Cleveland is a ghetto.
That's good parking.
It's a trash pile.
That's where I come from, man.
East Cleveland?
I'm
Terrible
from
access.
the ghetto.
We're thankful, we've got a building.
Not this one, I don't think.
You know, you got parking,
What is that?
handicap.
East 133rd Street.
Pastor Al, where do I live?
Well, technically, you're on the east side of Cleveland because you're on the east side of the river.
Well,
It's on the east side of the river, so it's technically, that's the divider.
I'm sorry, but I've never seen a river in Cleveland.
Skyhawk
Unless
River.
it was the street. Unless it was like the street and it was flooded.
You know that big.
she lives by the fleet.
No,
Yeah,
it's true.
Oh,
It's like,
see, ghetto.
I've seen stairs.
But on the west side of 77.
I either live on the east side or the west side.
Tremont.
Hallways,
No, no,
set of
no.
steps,
No.
they're hallways, set of steps.
No, it's on the east side, but
Further,
Oh.
further up.
yeah, just off 77.
Newburgh.
Yeah.
Just above Newburgh Heights, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we're live and all your friends are gonna come to my house now and stalk me. They're gonna be like, the famous Lauren. Can I have your autograph?
Got bars on your windows, right?
Yeah.
No? Oh, okay.
No
Then-
windows. You get-
Yeah, that's Slavic Village.
Yeah, it's kind of getting on the outskirts of it. because I think the highway, when they built it, kind of cut into Slavic Village. So,
Why did they have to build a house right in front of the house? Terrible idea.
You right by the freeway or?
It's right in front of the
When they
house.
built it, had no front yard.
house, road, little bit of ground. and free.
Because I know they got that one, freeway bridge taken apart
Mhm.
and
Where they parked the door.
is that Harvard?
Well, there was no other buildings around, and, there was no schools.
Somewhere right around there.
And if there was.
Yeah, 'cause I went up there and I followed the detour lines. I went all the way down,
I mean, if there was a building, there
went all the way down East 79. I can't think of the name of the road I turned on to, went all the way over to East 49th Street and came up that way. And I'm like, okay, and then I saw the one sign, you know,
Last time we were up there, that's all for.
Yep.
The ceramic factory on the corner.
It still
Oh,
is.
that huge.
Is it?
117, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge.
When we went to Euclid back in September, we had to get off, or we got off because it was
They held that.
traffic there where that, they're doing all that construction on 77 backed up.
Yeah, they're-
back in parking
they're
lot.
actually,
So
they're
we
taking
got
out those embankments to add a new
Then we
lane.
went down to
There's
55th,
several factories down there, so.
when we got up to where 490 comes in, it was just like, oh my. It was-
I love that fire.
That's closed until spring, if I'm not mistaken.
Right now, it's like, the top space is in the art space.
All through the servers.
But, you know, we just had too much of a problem. We all voted on it. We got sold to
Now, I would be curious to know,
No.
with Christianity Today, the people that are their subscribers, what are their,
Well, I bet they're Muslim, I bet.
I don't think so. Because I have a feeling a lot of their subscribers are like Presbyterian and, you know, the people that don't like Trump anyway.
They've been drifting away.
That's what
Yeah.
Oh, Chrislam people, okay.
that's what I'm wondering, what the back, you know, what the makeup of the people who subscribe is. I mean, sometimes you can have editorial people that are different than the people that subscribe, but
Yeah, this was an op-ed published yesterday by Christianity Today. And it says, simply titled, "Trump should be removed from office. It's time to say what we said 20 years ago when the president's character was revealed for what it was." So,
His character is better than mine.
Well, that shows says more about them than it does about Trump.
Yeah.
Pastor Al,
Mhm.
I just remember this. When I was in my history class this week, everyone was talking about Trump being impeached and whatnot. And so I'm like, well, why did he deserve to be impeached? What did he do wrong? And then this one kid in my class is like, he did everything wrong. And so I'm like,
so what?
yeah, but what did he do wrong? He's like, everything. But what specifically did he do wrong? And they just kept saying everything. Like, you don't even know what you're talking about.
they don't, yeah, they.
That was a great question that you asked because
Yeah.
And in Congress, they're having the same question. What did he do wrong?
Well, and they did the impeachment, and they charged him with obstruction of Congress because he did what President Clinton did. He did what President Nixon did when they were considering impeachment against him. He appealed to the Supreme Court in regards to about things that he had to do. It was perfectly within his rights to do that, but they didn't like that he did that, so they charged him with obstruction of Congress. And they called abuse of power because he supposedly asked the Ukrainian president to investigate and dig up dirt on Joe Biden,
But that's
which
not what he
didn't
asked.
happen. No. So in other words, like Lauren's classmate, who when asked what did he do wrong, everything. Well, give me an example of what he did wrong. Well, he did everything wrong. Well, if he did everything wrong, you should be able to give at least one example. Well, everything. So after 3 years of the Mueller report, which said he did nothing wrong, and then after all the sham impeachment hearings in the House, which everybody came forward and said, well, I heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from another that, he did something wrong. But what did he do wrong? Well, and then when challenged on more than one occasion to say, what law did he break? Silence. Anybody tell us what law he break? Raise your hand. Nobody. All the witnesses that they called to show how badly he needed to be impeached could not cite anything that he did wrong. So basically, he was really impeached because he won the election, because they said when he won, well, we're going to impeach him. He hadn't even taken office and they said they were going to impeach him. How do you impeach somebody for doing something wrong in office when they haven't even taken the oath of office yet?
You're so narrow-minded.
I know.
Yeah, shame on
So
You
now
think too much.
they came up with the shortest investigation into an possible impeachment in history. They also came up with an investigation where it was all one-sided. The only people allowed to call witnesses were the Democrats, and the Republicans were excluded from many of the hearings, even the ones in their own committee that they were members of. And the president and his side was never allowed to mount any sort of rebuttal or anything. And then when it finally comes down to, remember Adam Schiff going, oh, I have evidence of all the terrible things he's done. When it come down to it, he had nothing, absolutely nothing. Nobody had anything. So they charged him with two ambiguous terms. Neither term is grounded in any kind of act or thing, incident.
Well, because they're just trying to find something.
It's purely a
Making
political
something
hit
up.
job, which is what they've been doing since before he was elected. Because it's apparent that the Democrats were utilizing, this is why they're so upset about the Ukrainian thing, they were utilizing the Ukrainians to try and throw the election to Hillary.
Then somebody stepped up over there in Ukraine and said, hey, you guys are missing $8 billion. Where's it at?
Right.
And
So,
Joe Biden's son's pockets, a lot of it. And Nancy
Oh, the one-
Pelosi's son and Kerry's stepson.
now one fellow from, what would it be, the Treasury Department? Who would look into, fraud of that nature
Over in Ukraine or here?
here and over there. Doesn't that fall
Biden got
under
that guy fired.
Yeah, because he said, unless you fire him, you're not getting the $1 billion. And he bragged about it.
That sure sounds like quid pro quo.
Yeah. And so far as it goes, there's no law that says you can't have that quid pro quo.
Strict attached.
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, but they decided that now it's got to be bad. Because we attach things all the time. We will do this for you if you will do this. Well, that's a quid pro quo.
It's only bad if you're a conservative.
Exactly.
If you're a liberal,
Or
it
if you're Trump,
doesn't
yeah.
matter. It's just old
Yeah.
news.
Well, who was that one pastor down there in Florida where they took everything from him?
Not sure.
I can't think of his next one. Sent him to federal prison.
Are you talking about the guy with the creation ministry?
Yeah, he's the
Oh,
one
yeah,
that,
he wasn't a pastor, sort of an evangelist.
And that was his
what's
own
his name?
fault. That was his
Huh?
own fault.
Bovine.
Hogan, yeah, Kent.
Yeah.
Okay, what about it?
He went to prison because he didn't
Oh,
pay his
yeah, I know
taxes. Yeah. But him and who was the actor? Denzel
Snipes was.
Snipes, Wesley Snipes. He went to prison too. They both listened to the same tax advisor. And the tax advisor they listened to said, you don't have to pay taxes. I don't pay taxes. I've never been to prison. He lied about the last part. He'd been to prison for not paying taxes. So Wesley Snipes followed his advice and he went to prison. Ken Hovind followed his advice. He went to prison. A lot of people try to say, oh, they targeted him because he was a creation ministry leader. No, he targeted him because he didn't pay his taxes. And they gave him every opportunity to pay some taxes or come up with a plan, and he just refused to do it. See, sometimes people who are on our side try to complain that we're being targeted because of our religious views. And sometimes it's just because they're doing stupid things. And personally, that's kind of what happened with Hovind. If he had worked the IRS, they didn't target him right away. They tried to work with him. And he was convinced because of his tax advisor that, I don't have to pay taxes. And so he just held on to it to the bitter end, and off he went to prison. It's just like the guy that gets celebrated out in Indiana, Indianapolis Baptist Temple, what was his name? But he had this big church, and he had a big church school.
Oh, I know.
And everybody says, oh, the
Jack
IRS
Hiles,
targeted
Jack
him.
Jack Hiles.
Not Hiles. I can't think of his name now. He was in Indianapolis. And everybody says, oh, they targeted
Dixon.
him. Yeah, Dixon, Dr. Dixon. And they said they targeted him because of his his religious stand. Well, what happened was, and this is what they don't mention, is that he basically didn't want to withhold taxes on his teachers, and he listed them as ministers. Well, in the first place, what independent fundamental Baptist is going to call for women as ministers, as pastors, basically? But he listed his school teachers as ministers so that they didn't have to withhold taxes on them. And they
So
said,
he was cooking his books.
well, there's one way to look at it, but basically, you know, they said, you can't do this. And he said, well, I'm gonna do this. So he did something stupid. He listed all these women as ministers. That's wrong. There was a church in Samoa that did a similar thing. Well, I shouldn't say similar thing. They got in trouble not because of their religious position, but because in their church school that they had, instead of withholding the tax money from the teacher's paycheck and sending it off to the tax authority, they withheld the tax money from the teacher's paycheck and diverted it into the church account.
Whoa.
And the Samoan tax authority almost padlocked the church and the school. But thankfully, a guy that was working there had worked for the tax agency, and he was able to go in because he knew the people and do some fast talking and arrange a restitution plan, and just barely kept the church open. Now, if it would have closed, the headlines, you know, people would have said, oh, they closed them because of religious harassment. No, when you take money from a teacher's paycheck and say this is going for your taxes, you know, the FICA taxes and local taxes and all, and you don't send it there, but instead you put it into your church account, that's theft. When you, as a pastor of an independent fundamental Baptist church that preaches vociferously from the pulpit that women cannot be pastors, and then you go and take a dozen women and declare them ministers so that they can get the ministerial tax-free as pastors exemption, it's not right.
Deception. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so as a consequence, these are things that happen, and then people go, oh, I'm being persecuted for my beliefs. And Hovind was the same thing. You know, I don't have to pay taxes. Nobody said, there's nothing that says I have to pay taxes. My tax advisor says he's not paid taxes for years, and they've never been able to put him in prison because of not paying taxes. So you can't send me to prison. And then he finds out later his tax advisor lied about not going to prison because he'd been to prison for not paying taxes. And Wesley Snipes, same thing. You know, it's just,
So he found out about that he was lying to him?
well, I don't know if Ken Hovind ever did, but people who were looking into it, because we covered this at the legal seminar at Lighthouse Legal Ministries back when that was all in the news. They were talking about taxing and the taxation and what do we as pastors, as ministers, what is our responsibility? And they said, you have to pay taxes. You know, we're, you know, what was it?
Render unto
Brother
Caesar
Hamilton.
what's Caesar's.
Yeah, well, Brother Hamilton said we're tax minimizers, not tax, you know, protesters or whatever, however he phrased, he had a phrase that he used. But we want to minimize the amount that we spend on taxes. We want to, you know, reduce our taxable income. But whatever is legitimately taxable, you know, we render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And yeah, it's just that some people got involved in bad influence, you know, and I don't know that Hovind and Snipes were the only people who went to jail because of that guy. He didn't tell his people that he'd been to jail for not paying taxes. It was later on it was found out. You know, I don't think he voluntarily told anybody that. People started searching and they found out that he was a liar. And unfortunately, some good people believed him and well, they paid the penalty. Now there are times, to be sure, where people are targeted, and that does happen too, but in those particular cases, they weren't so much targeted as they were doing stupid things. And it's unfortunate, but
Good question.
Yeah.
Who do you think is the biggest snowflake in the Bible? Human snowflake.
it's the biggest snowflake.
I I went to.
I got a contender, but go ahead.
Went to a movie 2 nights ago, which was, No Safe Spaces,
Mm-hmm.
with Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla.
Right.
And they talked about how a conservative speaker can't go into a college campus because there'll be, like Ben Shapiro,
Right.
because there'll be protests outside, and it's not just verbal protests, they're gonna be smashing windows and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, who's the biggest snowflake contenders in the Bible? I'm tossed up between Saul or Herod. They were both nasty.
But in terms of snowflakes,
Yeah,
How
I
about-
know, because a
Gideon.
snowflake, I don't like it, you're invading my
Mhm.
space, I don't feel comfortable with this attitude.
easily
I want your
offended.
job.
Easily
We want your
offended, yeah.
job.
Look in Esther.
Haman,
Oh, Haman, yeah,
Haman.
he's a good
there you
one.
go.
That's the first one that popped into my mind.
Yeah, Haman.
Because when you look in Esther,
Who's that son like?
yeah,
When he's laying on the floor.
chapter 3, yeah, Esther chapter 3 though, in terms of the early, easily offended and then wants them stopped.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Esther chapter 3 verse 1, that'd be a good series, the biggest snowflakes in the Bible. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes which were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him, but Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath, and he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. And what's interesting is when you get down here to a little further down,
Was pleading to the queen to tell the king not to hurt him.
not yet. Let's see. There's
It's gonna disappear.
I'm looking for the one where he talks to his wife. I think it's chapter 5 here. Right. Here's chapter 5, verse 9. Then went Haman forth that day joyful with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself. And when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above all the princes and servants of the king. And Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king. And this is again why I think he's the chief snowflake here. Verse 13. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Just the sight of him, just the knowledge of him being there was too much for him. He was just overcome. It just overwhelmed him. So, and then of course his wife and all say to make the gallows. And then it's after this that he throws himself on the queen's bed, which he says it's this wicked Haman. And then the next thing you know,
King
they put
walks
the
in,
bag
he's like,
over his head and yeah.
They take him out and hang him on
On his own
Mordecai's
gallows.
gallows.
His whole family.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, so that's, Like I said, that's my contender for one of the biggest snowflakes in the Bible.
It's a good one.
And, yeah, like you said, Herod and Saul and some of these other ones. Thinking of the elders in Israel that wanted to put a stop to Christ's preaching because if not, the Romans would come and take away their place. That's some of the snowflake.
Sounds like the
had-
very people that's running our country today.
That was the chief priest, wasn't
Yeah.
it? Remember that call? Not his father-in-law, it was Caiaphas.
Well, that wasn't just him. It was all the leaders there at one point. Because they were afraid
Except
that,
Nicodemus didn't. Nicodemus was a secret believer, wasn't he?
well, I think this was an earlier point where, let me see if I can find the verse here.
That'll be in Matthew.
I'm not sure. Actually, John chapter 11, where he says, John chapter 11, verse 45, then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus had done. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what do we? For this man doth many miracles. Verse 48 here, John 11:48. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. And then Caiaphas speaks up right there at this point. But this was the Pharisees and chief priests. And it's interesting there in verse 48, they recognized verse 47, he's doing miracles. They recognized in verse 48 that everybody was starting to lean toward him, believe that he was the Messiah. And then they made the statement, well, the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. So they weren't concerned at all with the Messiah, were they?
Nope.
They were
Not
only
them.
concerned with their place, their nation, meaning them as the rulers.
Yep, because if he turned out to be the true Messiah, everybody would say, we don't need these guys. So it's,
Yeah.
Does that sound like a power-hungry group I think of right now?
Well, let's see. Then gathered the Democrats and Pelosi and a council and said unto, what do we? For this man doth many miracles.
Yeah, like record unemployment and.
If we let him alone, all
He could be reelected.
people will believe on him, will vote for him. And the Republicans will come and take away both our place and our agenda.
was it Monday or Tuesday that the one guy from the Labor Department came out and said there's like, so far this year, 7 million new jobs, and there's like 4.5 million jobs that are so high tech they don't have anybody to do them. And he
Oh,
said
get up in India.
there's a total of 132 million people working in this country now.
I'm not one of those people.
They're saying, the number of people on the food assistance programs is dropping,
Good.
Like a stone
as
in
if it's a
water.
bad thing. It's a good thing. They're getting work. They don't need it.
Yeah.
In some places, I think it was Maine, they had to lay off the unemployment workers because they had too few unemployed.
Yep.
But
Nice
they,
problem to have.
Wow, that's really wild.
Wait, say that again, Neil?
there's a Bureau of Unemployment. These are, people who work for the state. In Maine, they had to lay some of them off because they had too few unemployed. They didn't have any work to do. They're busy twiddling their thumbs.
See, President Trump's contributing to unemployment.
Yep.
Costing
And if
jobs.
he cured cancer, they, say,
Put
look, he put all
doctors
these
out of work.
doctors out of work. So,
think it's Tennessee where they're laying off, human resources people there with, who take care of, the welfare system down there.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of money to keep Tennessee up for welfare.
Yeah.
People go to different, here, quit the job here, go to Tennessee and goes on welfare.
Well, all of a sudden, the coal mines are opening back up. Same thing with, West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
That one guy here in Ohio, he's like, he sent his report out, he's like tripled the number of people that used to work for him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly California will be this electric thing is interesting because
Yeah,
they can get a few common sense conservatives to push back hard enough. Maybe they can change. Last year was supposed to be the New California Act, and that kind of never went anywhere, to my knowledge. Where they were gonna split it up into 4 or 5 different states,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 3.
or 3 or, there were different plans, there was a bunch of different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, I think
San Francisco to San Diego.
Yeah, it's like LA and San Francisco.
Yeah, there's been a couple different plans. Another plan was to split off the northern several counties of California and the southern several counties of Oregon and establish a new state.
Yeah.
Because when you get out of the urban centers,
Certainly.
but remember during the impeachment farce hearings, the one legal scholar said, well, liberals congregate together because they like each other's company. Conservatives can't stand each other's company. That's why they spread out. Like,
Spread out because we can't stand the liberals.
but there's a certain, I mean, what she said about liberals congregating and conservatives dispersing does have an element of truth, because liberals basically want everybody to do everything for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas conservatives basically want to do your own thing, so they tend to spread out more. People who want to do their own thing. See, I've chosen to do whatever possible to not have to live up in Cleveland or down in Akron, because I don't want to live shoeboxed in with a bunch of people. I want to live
there.
Yeah, but I want to live out where I have a little more space, where I can, be a little more relaxed and do what I want to do. And
Think for yourself.
yeah, and also when we were looking to buy a house, we purposely refused to look at any place that had a homeowners association. Because I don't want somebody telling me what color I can paint my house, what color flowers I can have growing out front, how many cars I can have parked in my driveway.
Or across
Or whether
the
they
front
can
lawn.
What kind of flag you can hang in front of your house?
Exactly.
Like a POW's.
I don't want people telling me that, so I'm not living in a homeowners association type area. And I don't foresee the day of anybody doing that on our street. I don't know why anybody would. But I would absolutely refuse to go along with it, because why do I need a commissar telling me how to run my life?
This is like 2003. That one guy he hung a cross with the image of Christ on it for Easter, and people out there were outraged and said, "You got to take it out." So they sued him.
Well, there was a veteran who put up, what it was, a POW flag, wasn't it?
Mhm.
The guy made it all on.
But see, those things happen. I remember a long time ago, I think I was just in college, just out of high school, and we went over to somebody's house to help somebody that picked them up or whatever, because they lived in a condo in the Fairlawn area, and
Oh,
their car wasn't working, and my friend was gonna get down underneath the car and see if he could look, pop the hood and then get underneath and look and see if he could see anything. And they said, "Oh, no, you can't do that here." I said, "Why not?" "Because it's against the rules. You're not allowed to look like you're working on your car out in view of the street."
Like a bunch of people to bring bed sheets around and cover it up so no one can see.
And it has to be in the garage with the garage door closed, so the bed sheets wouldn't have worked.
Well, I hope you don't need to start your car while you got it in the garage with the door closed.
And then I remember listening to the radio one time, and this lady called in and said that you know, she got in trouble with the condo association because, or homeowners association, because her children were playing in her backyard. She's doing her dishes and she's
Playing in
watching
the
her kids
backyard.
right out in front of her playing. They said, no, children are only allowed to play in designated play areas, which was several hundred feet down the road, out completely out of sight.
Where she couldn't keep track of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a safety issue.
Yeah.
But
They
See,
wouldn't let her
that's-
designate her own backyard as a play area for her own
Yeah.
kids.
see,
Evil homeowners
These
association.
homeowners, yeah, these homeowners, that associations, they might as well just be part of the collective progressive.
as I said, that's when the Soviet Union broke up, all the commissars moved over here and started homeowners associations. You know, I mean, it's like living in a
Unreal.
Soviet Union.
Right?
That's what Khrushchev said, we're gonna take you from inside,
Yeah.
we're not firing a shot.
Former homeowners association. I went over to visit, I had to drop something off for somebody over in Brunswick one time. And I couldn't believe it. I go in and there's no, where do you park? And the place I wanted, I had to go up in this place and it's around back. It's in the middle of the day. Most people are gone. There's hardly any cars around anywhere. But there was a guy out patrolling the sidewalks with his little tiny toy dog. And I pulled in and it wasn't but, you know, half a minute. And he was at my car door saying, you can't park here. I said, I just need to walk over like to that door. That's about all the distance I had to go and leave this at that door and I'm back in my car. No, you can't park here. This is not a designated visitor parking area. He wanted me to go down out on the street and up the other thing. I said, I think I did end up just doing it, but you know, he might have sicked his little dog on me because he was out patrolling the neighborhood.
What
That's exactly
recourse-
what he was doing,
What
patrolling the
recourse could he
neighborhood.
actually do if you?
He could have had his dog bite my ankle.
Other than that,
He might have actually snagged my sock.
I mean, like, could he call the police?
I don't know, by the time they got there, I'd have
He'd be
been long gone. Maybe he was gonna try to intimidate me with sicking his dog on me. I mean, it was only that big.
Crazy.
Sick of Felix.
I got a cat that's got a bigger mouth and sharper claws than that dog. I care about
I knew
that.
I had a good childhood, I tell you.
And then remember when we were doing the flyers and right here in Brecksville, we went into this area and put flyers through this whole area and got a nasty call from the president of the condo owners. Oh, you were littering. And I had to go and clean up all of your mess, which meant she walked around picking up all our flyers. And she said, it's illegal to distribute literature here. And I'm thinking, well, there's all kinds of things for leaf gutter cleaning, get the leaves out of your gutters, for pizza delivery services and all kinds of stuff that was there.
Her saying it's illegal does not actually make it illegal.
Yeah, and I went back later and there was nothing on the list of restrictions as you entered into the compound
Saying no.
that saying no literature distribution. It's just that she took offense at our flyer and used her power as the homeowners association president to try to intimidate us. So we mailed one to every house in every apartment in there. Let the postman deliver one to everybody. We were doing a postcard campaign that we got into at the time where we were able to do a postcard and for a certain amount of money. It would go to every address, residential address in a certain zip code. And we had the money to do it at the time, and so we did it. And that was one of the areas that we sent it in because there were some other apartments that we couldn't get to everybody. So it was a more effective way of doing it.
I remember going down to Quaker Oats Company when I was little. Just go down there and sit up there on that Mill Street Bridge and watch all the train traffic go through. And there were signs that said, no trespassing. It's like, me and a bunch of kids from Crosby, we used to go down there and they'd have, it was like, this is down around Grace Park, because they had a lot of groundhogs that were down, they run along the tracks and stuff.
Yeah, I remember seeing the train.
That's when they had like 6 sets of tracks down through there.
Did you look up the Christianity Today to see what their breakdown of their subscribers is?
I did not look that up. I had the article here. So Christianity Today said, the facts in this instance are unambiguous. The President of the United States attempted to use his political power to coerce a foreign leader to harass and discredit one of the President's political opponents. That is not only a violation of the Constitution, more importantly, it is profoundly immoral. And more to the fact, what they just said there is completely false. He did not attempt to coerce a foreign leader to harass and discredit one of his political opponents. He congratulated a foreign leader and urged him to clean up corruption. And while you're at it, can you help us look into this mess?
Yeah,
I think that was that missing money.
That magazine's got some,
No, that's just a completely
their plans.
false statement.
Yeah, but you're looking at it wrong. That guy that they wanted to clean up, he was a Democrat. Now, if that was a Republican, they'd just send out help.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Like
like,
the
you know,
Biden you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the Biden, yeah, because he's the one that, he's the one that coerced the government to keep them from investigating his son, who was getting $50,000 to $80,000+ a month.
And then some, in addition.
Yeah, for having nothing but being related to the Vice President of the United States. That was the sole reason he was being paid all that money.
Right.
Well, the Burisma wanted to escape being investigated by being able to point to the fact that they have someone on their board who's the son of the US Vice President. And how would they allow him to be on our board if we were doing anything wrong? This shows that we're on the up and up. So they
they should get Hunter Biden up there and say, show us exactly where the country of Ukraine is at. See if he even knows that.
and it doesn't matter.
And it's pronounced crane, because they had the one, had a Ukrainian ambassador on there, and he's like, no, that's what the Russians started calling us. Stalin instilled that, the Ukraine, as a slur on our people. It's like, oh. I forget who he's talking to, and he's like, well, when did this happen? He goes, you remember when the 29 million Ukrainians died because of the hunger? Like, yeah, that's when he did that. He accused the famine that they couldn't take care of themselves. That's why he was there.
Well, it's interesting you mention that because that's how they do it. If you can control the farmers and the crops and the food supply, then you can
Exactly.
move away, and that's what they did. And that's partially what the Democrats have been trying to do to the Midwest and to the farmers here
Mm-hmm.
with some of this nonsense. I don't know all the
That's-
details about it, but you see there's some things going on where
Yeah,
they're
'cause-
trying to disrupt a lot of things.
That was Russian Revolution. They started with the farmers. They got the farmers all wound up, and as soon as they had the chance, they got rid of all the farmers.
And they starved them out. They
Mhm.
starved the whole country.
Told them you can only plant so much. They said
Remember
all that stuff.
Remember the Feed the World campaign in the 80s?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The so-called famine, what was it, in Somalia? Or was it
Africa,
Ethiopia?
somewhere in
I
Africa.
think it was
Um,
Ethiopia.
Famine was totally exactly what you're talking about. The communist government was starving people into submission. They moved the farmers off the land, put them in concentration camps. They were starving people systematically to force them into the cooperation. And so that Feed the World nonsense campaign, I still, just the whole thought of that, it's disgusting because I was in the Air Force at the time. I was in England at the time, and we were reading what was happening to what was going on with those supplies. there was a lot of, let's just say, handling fees. But the grain and stuff that they bought, when it got there, the government would not let it be unloaded from the ships unless they paid exorbitant fees, far higher than anybody else had to pay. What little did get it offloaded went into a warehouse on the dock, and most of it got eaten by rats and the government, or rotted, and they wouldn't let it be distributed. And the people who were behind the Feed the World campaign knew all this was going on. And yet they persisted in all this. Remember all those different entertainers coming together and
Mhm.
singing all these songs, Feed the World and all that nonsense. And then they had that horrid Christmas song,
Oh my.
that came out. I still can't stand that song to this day. But the people who were in charge knew what was going on, and they did it. They lied to, not just to Britain, they lied to the entire world about what was going on. And they had a complicit press because all they had to do was investigate, and it was there. I mean, we knew what was going on,
And all they had to do is get a bunch of entertainers together, making everyone think that it's.
but they were bringing in a lot of money,
They're coming to the rescue.
and they were getting all kinds of money.
Yeah, Mugabe did the same
Billions.
thing.
And the government was getting a lot of money. So they used that thing. Here's what they did with that Feed the World campaign. They moved money from well-meaning people in the West into the hands, to the pockets of the unscrupulous people who organized the campaign, but they also used it to move money into the pockets of the communist dictators and supported the communist government, put a lot of cash into that government, kept them in power.
Same thing, that's how Mugabe got control.
Yeah, he took the farmers off the land and they put his own people there that didn't
Killed
know what they
most
were
of the
doing.
farmers.
It's their go-to maneuver.
Yeah,
to get
Starve
rid of
people into
them
submission.
into
If you can control people's food and you can control their health care, then you control
And
So,
in places
Take
where
your
it's-
guns.
Yeah, that's it.
Take your guns.
them. Well, most of the places, they'd already taken the guns too, yeah. But that's the other thing.
That's
And
the third bolt.
And if Virginia is any indication of the rest of the country, they're in for a real problem if they get somebody in there finally following a Trump administration that goes back to the left and tries to do what Obama was doing and Hillary was going to finish, which was confiscate our guns.
Right.
Because the Supreme Court, which at the time had a liberal majority, ruled, what was it, 5-4, that militia in the Second Amendment meant the free citizens of the United States, not the military. Hillary said that was ruled wrongly. One of her goals was to get another case through, and they were going to replace Scalia with a lefty, and that case would have come through, and they would have ruled that militia in the Second Amendment means the military, which means anybody in here that's not an active duty military that has a gun suddenly now is in violation of federal law.
Yeah,
So how are they gonna take away guns from,
As my brother-in-law says, come get them.
look what was going on in Virginia.
Come on, get them.
Well, in the
Virginia, when they're
cities-
mobilizing the sheriffs in Virginia, declaring their counties Second Amendment sanctuary counties.
My uncle was living there in West Virginia. I went down there, and this was right at the time hunting season was in. I'm driving up through there, it's about like 8:30 at night, and it's like, had my brights on because all the hunters walking along these dark roads. I'm like, boy, if you wanted to get rid of somebody, this would be a good spot to do it,
Well, in the cities, they're in the last 365 days, they've almost installed, like up in Cleveland,
Mhm.
the 5G is pretty much almost block to block. It's unreal in 365 days how fast they put it on. And more are going up as we speak. I mean, it's 24 hours around the clock. They're putting these things up as fast as they can everywhere. And that's how they're gonna control the people in the big cities. Out here, it's a lot different because they can't put it up, it's probably zoned differently.
Well, see, the people who want the world population reduced to no more than 500 million, they don't want people living scattered about.
Right, they want you controlled.
They want everybody in
Right,
concentrated areas where nobody owns any land of their own. You don't have any vehicle of your own, either foot or bicycle power is the only way you can get around, or some kind of mass transit. That way, everything's contained, they control your access to everything. That's why in California, for instance, they banned fireplaces in new construction. You can't build a house in California with a fireplace now. And there's some places that are banning people from having home gardens
Why?
just because they can. Because if you have a garden and you can produce your own, food,
You can
you're
be
less
independent.
dependent on the government.
Oh, wow, yeah.
See, they want everybody on government, everybody dependent on the government. Because then, it's like this one guy I used to talk to, he was always worried. He said, well, I don't want to go vote because if they find out, because he was worried Hillary was going to win, if they find out that I voted Republican, then they'll cut off my welfare.
wow.
He actually
It's intimidation factor of,
he actually did not go and vote in primary elections for just that reason. And I think there may have been a presidential election that he didn't vote in because he was worried that they would mark down who he was, and if he didn't vote for Hillary and she won, or if he didn't vote for Obama and he won, that he would lose his welfare payments. So when you control people to that extent,
I thought it was a secret ballot.
it is. But see, here's the
You
thing,
could
the
go on
primary
and say, how'd
ballot,
you vote? I told
Yeah.
you vote this way, but I actually voted someplace else.
yeah, but the primary ballot though,
But it's,
it's open record as to whether you chose a Democrat, a Republican, a Green, communist, libertarian,
register.
or nonpartisan ballot. Because you have to declare in order to get the ballot. So the moment that you go in to vote in Ohio, if you go in and say, I would like the Green Party ballot, please, you are now officially registered in the Green Party. That's how it works in Ohio. If you go in and want the Republican Party ballot, you are now officially registered as a Republican in the state of Ohio. They do party membership by what primary ballot you take in a primary election. And see, our primary is coming up on March 17th. And so when people come in, and I'll get this because we get this every year. Somebody comes in and says, I want a ballot. And we say, do you want Republican, Democrat, Green, Libertarian, Communist, or whatever we have, because we've had Communist Party ballots on occasion. And they say, oh, I'm not telling you. Well,
and they don't.
I can't give you a ballot unless you tell me. No, it's supposed to be secret. I'm not going to tell you. Just give me a ballot. So, but I can't give you a ballot unless you tell me which ballot you want. And people actually get mad that I don't give them the ballot that they want, even though they refuse to tell me which ballot they
You got a
want.
solution, just lay them out like a set of cards. There you go, I'll turn my back.
But you can't do that because the ballots have to be kept track of. They're numbered in sequence, and you have to be able to know where every ballot went, not who voted that ballot, but you want to be able to know what happened to the ballot. And so
When did they get rid of the punch cards?
they got rid of them a long time ago. That was after George W. Bush won.
Oh, yeah.
Because remember the hanging chads and pregnant chads and dangling chads and dimpled chads and all kinds of nonsense.
Voter intent, oh,
So
let's
they were
see.
trying desperately to get Al Gore in.
Well, they're saying that Google and this kind of thing is what's going to be the voter fraud and determining.
And they did it in the last election, last presidential election
they
now.
already did that. They did that.
They did it
last
2
election.
years ago,
Right.
or a year and a half ago, in the 2000 and, they did it 2016, then they did it in 2018.
Yeah.
And there's just
Some
certain things
divine
they put out.
intervention to,
In other words, if they send out, it's election day, make sure, have you gotten out to vote yet? Make sure you and your friends get out and vote. They only send it to Democrats,
That's right.
or they only send it to libertarians, or they only send it to Republicans. Well, you know they're not sending it to libertarians or Republicans. Then that motivates people because they see it. Oh yeah, voting, I haven't voted yet, I better get out and vote.
I think it's gonna be exciting to see how, Trump's gonna have an absolute record, astounding amount of money.
You've got
And how he's gonna market it, how he's gonna market this campaign is gonna be intriguing. 'Cause he's pretty. he's got a
over the
pretty bright
last
staff.
over the last month, they said that he picked up almost 700,000 donors.
I forgot what he picked up the day of the impeachment vote. I forgot how many millions of dollars he raked in that day.
Well, it was like 6 million or something, it was a huge
Yeah,
amount.
but he'll put out like huge motion pictures like he did.
Well, he's gonna do these rallies.
And the rallies.
Because remember, in 2016, he was doing these rallies. And I was listening to this one guy, and he's been involved in the political scene for a while, and he said, but he's got no ground game. He doesn't have people out there doing this door-to-door stuff. He's just doing these rallies. Well-
When you're going to the rallies.
People love those rallies.
Yeah,
And
and
they're broadcast, there's several news.
he was,
I mean, it can be dangerous to go door to door if you're a Trump supporter.
oh yeah, especially in some neighborhoods. But some of those neighborhoods is becoming safer and safer.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
because the black support for Trump is,
Yeah,
over 30%.
those I forget what group it was. There was a group of New York City, the Black Business Association or something like that up here in New York City that knew him very well and how generous he was because he would give them money when the banks wouldn't, and literally made like hundreds, if not thousands, of them very, very wealthy and well off.
He's not really a racist.
Well,
Imagine
I
that.
mean, CNN is not true?
Oh,
that could be just a front, though.
Yeah, it must have been. He was scheming way back then.
Yeah.
I heard President Trump he was somewhere talking, and he was saying about the last election, about how, his people told him, you need to go up to Michigan. Come visit Michigan.
Oh,
Come
that
visit
was
Wisconsin.
when he was at Battle Creek. He was
Oh, he
talking
was saying,
about
that's right, as he was talking. And they were saying, and he was thinking about it, and they said, no, we're seeing these signs there, you need to come up here. He said that Bill Clinton told Hillary that she needed to go, but nobody would listen to him. And it was funny, because he was saying, he says to Crooked Hillary, and then he pauses, and he goes, do you think he calls her Crooked Hillary, or just Crooked? Hey, Crooked, you should go to Michigan. It was funny. Hey, Crooked, you should get.
He would rile some people up in California. I wonder what the effect would be out there
I
because.
can't think of that guy's name. He's a politician out there, and he's the one that keeps harping on the idea that Trump could actually take California because of that one proposition where it said marriage is between one man and one woman. And they passed that with like 75% of the vote of the entire state.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what was it, about 2 weeks later, that federal judge stepped in and said, nope, that's
and the
unconstitutional.
Attorney General refused to defend the law.
Exactly. And he's up,
But I think the new California governor is, they're saying.
Oh, that guy is-
Brown.
Yeah,
Hard to believe, but yes.
I don't know how it's possible.
yeah. Back up to when he said the Attorney General and State Attorney General wouldn't defend the law. In fact, they even ruled that the people who helped pass the law had no standing to bring a suit to challenge it.
Well, then who
They're
does
the
have
ones who
standing?
helped pass the law.
and he's the same guy that's, he's telling Trump, come out here and bring that up.
That's utilities, the farming, I mean, there's so many issues out there that.
Yeah, when they were passing I can find it here, when they were passing the articles of impeachment, McConnell in the House, or in the Senate, put through, I had it here somewhere, I'm trying to find it, how many more judges he put through.
Oh,
At least 11?
It might have been more.
13.
Was it 13?
In the Ninth Circuit too.
I think one of them at least was the Ninth Circuit. He has effectively changed the Ninth Circuit to a moderate court. And he's flipped 3 circuit courts.
It's impressive. Not the least of which, the wall. He could go
Yeah.
out there and talk about the success of the wall and get support out there. You gotta believe there's lots of Californians that want that wall.
Yeah, 13 nominations went through the Senate.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you about, that we got an angry turtle in the Senate, because he was just like, because he was telling Nancy, you can do whatever you want, and I'm doing what I gotta do.
There's a, so he's got 2 Supreme Court justices. He's got at least 50 appellate court justices. And then, what's the other one called? I was looking for it here. There's the
district.
district one, yeah.
There's like
Circuit,
119? I think that's the number I heard.
Well, here's a statement here. 1 out of every 4 U.S. circuit judges in the country have been put on the bench in the last 3 years. 1 out of every 4 in 3 years. Now,
Let's get 4
How
more.
many
Now-
districts
4
are
more
there?
years.
I'm not sure.
And the average age of these is younger than the average age had been previously when they were put in place.
Now, is every one of these going to turn out to be a strict constitutionalist? Probably not. But they're starting a lot better than they would have been,
Oh,
because had Hillary been putting these people in, they would have been
They would have started on
the
left,
creative
kept going,
types,
kept
that
going.
the living document types, and it would have furthered the drift of the courts to the left. And it's the left, and this is of concern to us as Christians, because it's the courts that took the Bible out of public schools. It's the courts that took the prayer out of public schools. It's the courts that have taken the 10 Commandments off the walls of public schools. It's the courts that gave us same-sex marriage. It's the courts that gave us abortion on demand. Nobody's voted for these things. People voted repeatedly across the country to defend marriage. Marriage is between a man and a woman. Defense of Marriage Acts passed with huge percentages all across the country, including California. Ohio had one. And with a Supreme Court decision made by leftist people who didn't believe in the original intent of the Constitution, but that it was a living document that you could read into anything you want, they eliminated the will of millions of people across the country based on their whims. And these are the kind of people that we're getting rid of in the courts. There's some, McConnell said earlier this week that if there's an opening on the Supreme Court here in the next year, they will fill it before Trump leaves office. Even if he doesn't get reelected, they will fill it during Trump's term. And, the idea that Ginsburg is going to last another year in the court is getting slimmer by the day.
Yeah,
But there's
she's
also-
sick again.
Yeah, there's also some talk that Clarence Thomas may take this opportunity to retire, because he's getting up there in years, knowing that he can have a strong constitutionalist replace him, because he's been one of the strongest constitutionalists. He really is one of the backbones of the conservative side of the court, the constitutional side of the court.
They don't give him no credit either.
Oh, no. And you know why? Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Right.
Joe Biden is the one who is head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who assured Clarence Thomas, they'll ask you a few questions. Some of them might seem a little rough, but just, we have to do this, but it's not going to be any problem. Everything's going to be fine. I'll be there for you. And then the next day when they come in, Joe Biden was one of the first ones stabbing them in the back.
With Anita Harris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hill or whatever her name was.
Anita Hill. Yeah.
Anita Hill, that's right.
Yeah.
You can rest assured that Trump is gonna, if Biden makes it into through and gets to be the nominee,
How could Trump not win?
this will be the greatest show of of exposing insanity, because his team is just gathering all the
I don't know, I
evidence
just-
as we speak.
I'm just waiting for a presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And, somebody say, well, President Trump, under your term, unemployment has reached record lows. And how do you think that it will improve in the second term? Then they get to Biden. How do you think you'll deal with his record unemployment? Well, I want you to know I was a lifeguard and I used to stick my skinny legs into the pool and let the kids rub the hair on my legs. And Israel always needs to be a two-part state. And I know about roaches and I know about corn pops. And everybody be called, what is this man saying?
It would be so unfair for that, because there would be a battle of wits with Biden being an online man.
That's what Reagan did to Mondale.
Yeah, when's the last time you went to a Bible study we talked about corn pops? But I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, Mondale, he was nicknamed Mondole, but he didn't stumble over his words like Biden did. Biden was asked a question in the Democrat debate last night. He was asked a question about, I don't know what it was.
They might fight.
But he went from talking about, I don't know, unemployment or something to talking about Israel's two-state solution and why Netanyahu needs to be held in line. And nothing to do with the question. In the middle of the question, it's just like he had a brain freeze and he forgot what he was talking about and went to a totally different subject.
His
That's
upbringing got tweaked and he
Yeah. It was unbelievable.
Well, I was painting this picture one day, and you know what I had for dinner last night?
Corn pops.
That's because I remember that debate.
And then I'm gonna tell my wife to go shoot the double barrel shotgun off the balcony. Like, where does he come up? And if he had an R after his name, he would be the laughing stock of all the late night comedians. Everybody would be making fun of him. You'd have Saturday Night Live skits of him out there shooting off a 12 gauge from his, from the balcony and telling the kids to come up and rub his legs and everything. But they let him get away with all of this.
And Trump jumped on it immediately though. Remember when he just started calling him Creepy Joe?
Yeah.
Always
You got those pictures of him, with his arms.
around the little kids. And it is.
That's so creepy.
And the ladies smelling your hair. And
Uh-huh.
The lady smelling his hair.
No, him smell their hair. And it doesn't matter how old.
He would stand behind, like when there were the photos.
His hands on her
And
shoulders.
he would, behind a woman, he would, her hair.
like this
Is that creepy or?
Whether they were 6 years old or
Right.
76 years old, it didn't matter.
Then the one,
That's like
the
creepy
parents
with
were
his
like, don't
Yeah.
touch my kids. And they had to because they were onto him. And this is just when he announced that he
Yeah,
was
really.
thinking about running. Trump came out with
That's
Creepy
right.
Joe and immediately phrased
Is
the
it Creepy
conversation
Joe or just Creepy?
that if this guy
Creepy
gets
Joe.
nominated, I'm going to destroy him.
I don't think he will be nominated. He'll be too easy a target.
Well, unfortunately, Buttigieg is creeping up there. He may be the dark horse that comes in.
They'll nominate anybody.
And,
They're not going to vote.
it's just,
I can't.
they're portraying him as the Christian, the moral Christian common sense voice.
And
The
crowd
guy
life
that's
of,
married to another man that
Around
says
life
any
of-
Christian that doesn't agree with him isn't a real Christian. Yeah,
Pete.
yeah, St. Pete, that's right. Oh, St. Pete instead of Mayor Pete.
Well, no, the one guy who did the comparison, he goes, take a look. Trump must enjoy what's happening to him. Look at this. This guy's got a smile, not a wrinkle. You look at Nancy Pelosi, she looks like she's been dead 6 years.
Oh my.
And
Oh
it's
my.
just, oh man. And I started laughing like crazy. Listen to a lot of talk radio. Some of them guys, they just there's no filters here, man. It's like, let the truth fall out where it may.
But it's very much a moral fight. And you've got the Democrat Party that in the last presidential election, last convention, specifically wrote God out of everything and positioned themselves as the abortion on demand for any reason at any time party. And, just everything.
After Bruce.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Well, they keep trying to control Trump, and Trump says, I've never been controlled. It's like, I am me.
There, he photoshopped this, but that's the characteristic things we're talking about.
That's,
You probably can't see it over there, but this one guy, he's actually about, I think he's about Christopher's age. And he's or is he Lauren? He's Lauren, your age, Lauren.
Oh, boy.
And but he Dakota Sawyer, he does that thing with Steve Krause
Oh,
and
yeah.
what's his name? The
Monday.
Monday nights.
Dakota.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was at one of the things I think you guys went to us with.
Who's
Um,
Dakota?
That's this kid here.
That kid in the picture. They photoshopped him in
He's
with
like
one
a
of
high
the,
school kid, but he's real active with politics.
yeah.
Up in,
They photoshopped
Lorraine,
him
right?
into the, out of Lorraine.
Yeah.
How
They
did I know
photoshopped him
that?
into that picture.
Like one of the act meetings or something.
There was no other kids at the acne
Oh,
besides
that's
me and
funny.
Christopher.
That's really funny.
And he captioned it, "So I felt creeped out today at the Student Action Summit with Joe Biden."
That's funny.
Oh, my.
Well, it's true that that guy, he claims to be this voice of Christianity.
Oh.
This Buddha,
Yeah.
and that's a dangerous thing.
Oh, yeah,
For,
but-
for minds that don't have
Yeah.
any discernment or any knowledge of the truth.
Mhm. Well, and see, his whole thing is he's a Matthew 25 Christian. If you look at Matthew 25, and you'll see this amongst the ultra-liberal churches. This is what they cite, because we talked about here the United Church of Christ, where he had a thing, was it a year ago, 2 years ago, that I listened to one of his short sermon things online, where he talked about if you've seen one of these gospel tracts, that tells you that you're a sinner and that Christ died for your sins, and has a prayer on the back, and you put your faith in Christ, your salvation, your sins are forgiven and you have a home in heaven. And then after he goes through that, he says, wow, I don't necessarily disagree with anything that's in that. And then he went on to disagree with everything that was in that, because he said it was a pie in the sky salvation that was of no earthly good. It was utterly useless. And then he went on to talk about Matthew 25 and
What
how,
verse does that start, or is it the whole chapter?
well, it starts in Matthew chapter 25, verse number 31. And they were talking about this shoebox thing they were making for these immigrants that they were bringing into Akron. And saying that if you pack one of these shoeboxes and give it with love, that's true salvation. You're saved if you do this. If you pray a prayer and put your faith in Christ, confess your sins, that's nothing. That's of no earthly good. It's a pie in the sky nonsense. But where it says in Matthew 25, verse 31, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered, and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger, and took thee in, or naked, and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison, and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. And then he goes through the other section and says, because they didn't do it, they refused him basically. But here's how they say this is salvation. You go out and you feed somebody who's hungry. You take in somebody who's homeless. You clothe somebody that has no clothes. You give to somebody. In other words, charity, and you know you're a Christian. That saves you. But the problem. Oh, go ahead.
No luck to the thief on the cross.
Yeah.
It's all works.
Yeah, it's all works. These are all good works, and there's nothing wrong with doing these things. But notice how the section starts. Verse 31. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him. When is that going to take place?
Yeah.
That's the second coming, right? Jesus comes in all his glory with all the holy angels with him. So we're talking about the second coming of Christ. So when does that occur? That occurs at the end of the tribulation period. And then what does he do?
Judges the nations.
He judges, right. He sit upon a throne of his glory. Before him shall be gathered all nations. And he shall separate them referring to who? The nations. And he divides the nations. So this is a judgment of nations based on how they did what?
Treated
the
Israel.
handle of the Jews.
The Jews and presumably believers
Yeah,
during the tribulation
yeah.
period. Because what's going to happen during the tribulation period? They're going to be persecuted. And the Antichrist is going to issue the mark of the beast at the midpoint of the tribulation. If you don't have the mark of the beast, you can't buy, you can't sell, and you get your head chopped off. So somebody's going to have to support these people and help them make it. So some nations, some groups of people in the world are going to say, you know, the Antichrist is doing that, but we can't turn these people away. And there's going to be people who are going to help them. And those nations are the ones that are the sheep nations. Those nations that turn their hands against the Jews and the believers and refuse to help them, those are the goat nations. And so these sheep nations are now going to go into the millennial kingdom. And the millennial kingdom is made up of nations. Now, the nations are made up of individual people. But we're talking here a judgment of nations, not people. So in Matthew chapter 25, people don't make this distinction.
So is he, I haven't heard the man speak, so I can't say. But I have heard, like you mentioned on talk radio, that he's brushing himself as a Christian.
Oh, yeah.
He's righteous and all this, and he's got it right, and we got it wrong. Is he citing this chapter and verse, or are you just referring?
Oh,
to
he cites this. You're sick and you visited me, or you're hungry and you fed me, and all these people do.
And it sounds good to the individual who's not biblically.
Oh, yeah. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. And God said, blessed of the Lord to these people. But he also said to another group of people, when they said, Lord,
They
Lord,
did all these things.
he said, I never knew you.
Right, and they're all saying they did all these things.
Uh-huh.
Which-
Because
which
they
he's
never
saying
knew
is good.
him. They just did these things. And see, that guy here pastoring the United Church of Christ said, when you do these things, that's salvation. And he was referencing this chapter.
He's almost like committing self-fulfilling prophecy on himself,
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling the Lord's prophecy
Yeah.
when these people say those things. That's,
What about the rest of chapter 25?
So they're doing wonderful work in his name.
Yeah. And in fact, I was going to look up that passage here.
is that the Lord thing?
Yeah.
So they say that, he says that salvation, so their, salvation is disregarded.
I'm sorry. I didn't get you.
I said, he says that salvation, so salvation in the Bible, where it says salvation is disregarded.
Yeah. They go to this instead. That's why they call them Matthew 25 Christians. It was Matthew 7 and verse 21, where he says, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name have done many wonderful works? Verse 23 says, and then will I profess unto them, I never knew you, depart from me, ye that work iniquity. So these are the people that fall into that category of there's a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof is death.
But they're not saved.
They're not saved because they never knew him,
on their works.
and he never knew them.
Right.
Exactly. In name only. In name only. Because, think of how many, and it's not just Catholic priests,
It's
but the one pastor that I was citing. And I pray for his salvation, but him and countless others who believe they're doing all this, and maybe Mayor, St. Pete there is sincerely believing that what he believes is true. Well, then he's going to be in the same category. Depart from me, for I never knew you.
It all goes back to Cain and Abel.
Yeah, works versus Cain said, look, you got to be impressed with me. I overcome the curse and I produce this great produce.
Yeah, self.
Look what I did, rather than sacrifice what God wanted. Obedience, God said, is better than sacrifice. That's what got Saul in trouble. He said obedience is better than sacrifice.
Saul the snowflake.
Yeah, that's all the snowflake. We'll think of it in that way. Then you gotta have to ask Pastor Lutz, who's the snowflakes in the Bible? See when he comes up with anybody, he'll have to tell us. He'll probably like that.
See, I was gonna say, Gideon.
Gideon was kind of a snowflake.
Because of the way he hid and.
At first,
With the guy with the
he
one talent.
toughened up.
No, the guy that, hid when they were,
Yeah,
he didn't want to be caught.
he did the fleece test, remember, because God told him to
But
do
in
it.
the
He said,
beginning,
well,
he
yeah, make
was-
sure it's God, and
He
Let me
was
do the
hiding
test,
when
yeah.
he was trying to thresh his wheat.
yeah. But he eventually did the right thing, so. He did,
Like Samson too, a little bit. He was kind of everything.
but he wasn't quite a snowflake. No, he
In the
didn't.
end, though,
He was more of a,
sacrificed himself.
I
he
agree
was
with,
relying on his own strength.
yeah, but I agree with Ed's description of the snowflake. They get easily offended with people are doing, and then they want to put a stop not only to them, but everybody that does that. They just want to shut them all down. They don't want anybody to say anything they don't agree with.
Yeah,
Now it's because Mordecai certainly did that. And,
Yep.
So.
Because the king asked him, what should be done to a man that is like, and he's
That
like,
was
oh,
poetic.
there's that and that. I was like, yeah, banquet and everything, yeah.
Yeah, even-
Then he found out it was Mordecai, and he's like, oh, no, I can't have that.
But
Mind you, the guy was given the one talent while the others were given more, and he just hid.
he buried his.
Yeah. Well, I knew it's like, if I would have lost this, it's like, you didn't do anything with it. And that was the point.
Or Esau who came in and sold his.
Yeah, that's in Matthew 25. They seem to skip over that one. That speaks volumes.
For the oil, the red pottage.
Mhm.
He was hungry.
yeah, he didn't care for his heritage, really. Here's Buddha Judge or whatever his name is. Buddha Judge. I guess they make Saint.
Yeah, but they said that that people come to
Yeah,
Mayor Pete because nobody.
yeah,
He pretty much ruined South Bend, though.
yeah.
And
Well, he wants to do that. Well, look what Pelosi and
Well, look
Schiff
at
and all that have
Bloomberg.
done out in California, and they want to tell us that we're supposed to run the rest of the country like California, where it's like a third world country. They got typhoid reappearing in the streets of tuberculosis in the streets of San Francisco, and they put out maps to warn you where to go so that you don't step in stuff you'd rather not step in. It's like going back to the Middle Ages in those areas.
Yeah.
No, I correct that. In the Middle Ages, they had better hygiene.
And it's like one of the top 3 wealthiest counties. Marion County, is it?
Yeah.
It's one of the top 3 wealthiest counties in the country.
It's, I think it's second only to,
You got,
where Washington DC is at.
you got such as absolute homelessness and poverty and addiction, and then just the highest wealth, Silicon Valley right out there, in San Jose.
Got that one guy up here in Seattle that says they're doing the same thing up there.
Oh, yeah, I saw a big, the NRA documentary.
Because my brother Mike, he was stationed in Spokane when he was in the Air Force. He said Seattle was like heaven on earth. They didn't have smog. They didn't have, you'd always had the ocean breezes coming in. In the wintertime, it would get cold, but it would be a wet cold.
Yeah.
And the
Seattle.
snow, he goes, there's a difference. And he goes, you remember what happened to Buffalo back in 78? I said, yeah, they got like 12 feet of snow overnight. He's like, it don't happen out there. It'll snow, but it'll only last for so long because then the warm ocean breezes come in and everything has a mold. And he said it was just beautiful out there.
It's legal in Washington, California, Colorado,
Enjoy the scenery, but smoke all the pot you want.
Nevada.
They actually, he decriminalized heroin out there in Seattle, the mayor did. And that was 2 years ago. Boy, they having problems.
Well, I saw
Where did you
where,
say?
Seattle.
Colorado's like that too. The Colorado's having a lot of problems from their open use of marijuana.
yeah, in the border states, Kansas. Because they're
people
running in there to grab it,
yeah,
and then they're just like outlaws. Bringing
Doing what they
in tons of
want
pot,
to
yeah.
do. No one in
but
charge.
it's, but it's what people say would be, people don't want to work and people, the productivity goes down and.
What's one of the sure signs of the end? People will be dope heads.
Well, they argue that the pharmaceutical, pharmacopoeia, pharmacy, all comes from the same root word that's used sometimes to translate the word sorcery in the Bible.
Right.
And some sorcerers would use, like the American Indians use peyote to get,
In mushroom.
or others use mushrooms to get spiritual insights or, different things. And that's the root of drug. Well, a lot of, remember Timothy O'Leary?
Yep.
He claimed that you would have these mystical visions while on LSD. And a lot of people on drugs, they claimed that it brought them into connection with the powers of the universe.
They're bringing that program back, it's psychiatry.
Might have brought them into connection with something, but it
Mhm.
probably wasn't spiritual, biblical,
The LSD program.
just
Oh.
They're prescribing it again. And trying to bring it back in as a. It's troubling.
Oh, if I can remember this, they had one guy who told a joke about, they were all sitting there at the seance and they got their old grandfather back, who was an avid golfer, and found out he was golfing all day in heaven, started swinging his golf club at everybody at the seance. So they're all running and hiding. Yeah, you want to talk to me some more? Ruining the best game this late. Forget how that went. It was funny. It was Houlihan Big Chuck had it. It was hysterical if I could remember it. Yeah. And he's screaming at him, what are you bothering me for? I died 20 years ago. You're messing up my golf game. Something along that line. And he's sitting there swinging a 9-iron. Wow.
The new thing with the kids vaping.
Oh, yeah, that stuff is dangerous.
That's actually
Correction.
more than
Other kids.
pot. More than
New York
pot
City
and,
banned
and,
it,
and tobacco and alcohol now in the schools is vaping.
Well, it's, I talked to my sons about it, because it's a huge thing in their school. And
Yeah.
they're trying to crack down on it, but these kids, they rush. My son told me what would happen is when the bells would ring between classes, there would be like 30 and 40 kids just piling into the bathroom and just all huffing the vapors,
Mhm.
e-cigarettes or whatever they're called, the Juuls.
Yeah.
And all
Well,
the
the
smell of
problem,
it comes out in the hallways, and then the teachers are trying to crack down, and it's
Mhm.
like the kids are just.
yeah, part of the problem, when it was just the water vapor, but when they start putting these oils into it, it's the oils that are causing all kinds of problems in the lungs.
Big problem.
And then they're putting, oil THC
Nicotine and THC.
into it.
I always thought if you inhaled water into your lung, that's almost like drowning.
As long as it's.
Well, it depends on whether it's clear or not.
Yeah, and see, it's carrying these oils with it.
Yeah.
Oils get into the little tiny air sacs
Yeah.
and
Stick
cause
with
some of them to stick shut and cause all kinds of problems. And these kids, where you heard it in the news earlier this summer,
Yeah.
that were having, seeing some die,
Mhm.
it was because vaping with these oils. It's the oils.
And it's highly addictive.
Yeah, and the one guy that does our program sometimes on Sunday nights, he was telling about how some kids he knew, had bad reactions. And he was saying that it's only the ones that use the oil. The ones with the oils in it.
See, I don't have these problems because I don't do drugs because I'm not an idiot. So
And there's
That's
something to
good.
be said for that.
That's
Mhm.
excellent.
Yeah. But see, they've had various things in the past. And, everything from where kids would have parties where everybody would raid their parents' medicine cabinets and bring a handful of pills. They would throw them into a bowl and everybody would take pills at random. Well, this is ridiculous. It's like playing Russian roulette, only with drugs.
That's what happened to that girl up in Hudson. She got a hold of one of her mom's patches, and she was one of her chemo patches. Licked it, and like within 5 minutes, gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't mess around with those patches.
Yeah.
No, and it's
Fentanyl
just,
patches.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what these
Yeah, just
kids
like that. I mean,
do.
within 5 minutes, they hold the
Other
ambulance.
kids.
And they're
I
like,
said these kids, not you.
I heard a lot of
These ones that are
and
doing
the
it.
paramedics, and it's like, what did she do? And they handed him the patch, and he's like, she's gone. Like, just knowing what was in it, it's like, man. That's one of those patches that it
Mhm.
absorbs through your skin.
Yeah.
Slowly, at a
Yeah, and
controlled.
my sweat tongue licked it all off. I guess she got a dose that would last 30-day dose of something. I forget what they were saying.
It's probably a pain in the ear.
Probably a fentanyl.
They killed her?
Oh, yeah. They figured she was gone within 5 minutes, because she just,
Well, it's like that thing last year where at this time when they were trying to pass that law in Ohio, Soros is screwed with the fentanyl, making it a misdemeanor to have.
yeah,
Just a cup full of that.
Yeah, enough to kill everybody in the state practically.
And it's like, this stuff's coming in from the black market.
yeah, China.
China's sending it in through
Yeah,
the
they're
mail.
manufacturing it,
China
and
knows
they're
what
just
they're
trying
doing.
to kill us from within. I mean,
I thought Trump was getting on China about that, isn't
Yeah, we've
There's so
made
much of
progress,
they're making progress, but it is just, there's so much coming in. It's
Yeah,
not-
there's so many, those boats coming in, they only check so many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
when you
5%.
can fill up this cup with enough powder to wipe out Ohio.
That's
I mean,
what they
how
found.
do you stop that? You can dilute that out and get that across. I mean, how do you stop something that powerful?
Mhm,
You know,
That was that raid down there in Dayton. That one detective was killed.
mhm.
I forget how many pounds they seized of the fentanyl. It's like, man.
Pounds? Wow.
Mhm.
That was, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, because if you consider the fact that what they're saying is, and maybe Kim might know better, but I had heard that, I don't know, that, just
The nose on the,
a pinhead
yeah.
is enough
to
to
kill
kill
off
off.
Half a block.
Well, it depends on
You
what
could-
it is.
You know, you could overdose on it.
Yeah. And the other thing too that makes a difference is whether or not you're what they call, the term is opioid naive. And anybody in this room would more than likely qualify for being opioid naive.
We hope so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which means that you're not somebody who's normally getting drugs or normally getting narcotics. I mean, if you have somebody who's got chronic pain and they're on something all the time, then they're gonna be able to tolerate a bigger dose of something
Oh,
than
yeah.
somebody who's never had anything in their life or not had anything, for a long time. So, so that makes a difference in how much you can tolerate. Another thing
Right.
that makes a difference is how big you are, how much you weigh, can make a difference. And so, but yeah, if you're somebody who's, never done anything like that, you can be really sensitive. And then it's a purity thing too. It's just like other drugs. The more pure it is, the
Right.
more dangerous it is. And so,
Yeah, they would take a cup filled with that, like those pounds or whatever, and they would cut it so it could broadcast, millions and millions upon millions of dollars worth of drugs. But Cleveland is now having a billboard campaign about it. They have like these images of white powdered donuts on a billboard, and it's like, if you think that your cocaine is as safe as these powdered donuts, think again, or something like that. It could be a fentanyl in it or something. Like they're trying to make the drug addicts aware that you could be dying. It's just an interesting thing that they're doing. I don't know what it means, other than they're trying to educate the drug addicts that they're not saying don't do cocaine. They're saying don't, make sure you don't get stuff laced with fentanyl. It's kind of what I got from it. But yeah, feelings.
Well, then you have the problem with the police and the first responders who are handling, and they get accidentally exposed to this stuff.
well, and see, they used to field test
True.
stuff, and now a lot of municipalities are not field testing anymore. They are just bagging
So
it,
it's exposure.
tagging it, and turning it in because
Yeah.
They got the, those, it's like an EpiPen for someone who comes in.
oh yeah, yeah.
The Narcan.
Yeah.
And the problem is, there's a new form of fentanyl out there that those aren't very effective on.
Right.
And then you get these people that are having to have 3, 4
Or more.
or more shots of that stuff. And then what happens if you only have so many of those pens with you, so many doses of Narcan, and you're giving them all to this person, then one of your first responders gets exposed. Who do you give? Who should you give the shot? Who should you give the Narcan to?
Yep.
I give it to the first responder, especially if you got a repeat customer, because some of these people there's some people out there who actually they count on being revived,
Right, and they travel. They'll keep the pens on.
or no, they just figure somebody's going to find them and they'll. And I've even read where there's some cases where people like the risk of death.
Right.
That's the thrill of it.
Well,
The thought that they might die
yeah,
from this hit actually is part of the experience.
It's a perverse thrill.
Exactly.
It's really gross. I got the interview of the chief medic at Lorraine, city of Lorraine. That city is.
Right
wow.
now.
Oh, yeah,
The city-
Lorraine is
Absolutely right.
Lorraine is in terrible shape.
It's
Mhm.
nuts. And this woman, I was interviewing her about some of our products that we sell in the medical thing. And she kept going on and on about gross things. And I was like, why is there so much vomit? She's like, it's all overdose. Like, she didn't even bat an eye. She's just like, it's just people that are overdosed. Like, she's so numb to it. And I guess to a degree, if you're in that profession, you probably have to be
Like
pretty,
second nature.
pretty numb to what you see on a
Yeah.
daily basis. But to me, I was like, ooh. She's like, we sell medical straps. She was like describing the scenes that she's seeing it all the time. And like every other scene she would describe had to do with an overdose victim. And it's like, wow. And when you
Well,
drive around that town, you can kind of tell why it's
I
such a
don't
ghost.
like, I don't like.
Well, and the sad thing is that it's not just the Narcan, which is costing municipalities a lot of money. But there's also the human tragedy issue that what happens if you have one squad and Joe is over here overdosing and Tom is over here having a heart attack. And you don't get to Tom because you're with the overdose person, so Tom dies of his heart attack, whereas had he gotten to the hospital quicker, he might have lived. That's the kind of thing that places are dealing with on a
They ain't
real,
got enough task force and stuff like that.
so,
And people are getting exposed.
yeah.
Well, certainly Ohio's had a lot of tough talk about this stuff.
Mhm.
Thankfully, we didn't pass that, issue 2, I think it was last year.
Yep.
Yeah, thankfully.
Well, look, they want to get rid of the death penalty because the companies that make the sleeping potions for the criminal, they're like, we don't want to sell it to you if you're going to use it to put somebody under.
Well, they confiscated all his fentanyl.
Yep.
Use it.
Yeah. Either that or go to Walmart and get a rope and just start hanging people again.
Again, when you come back to that thing in Deuteronomy 19, talks about not only punishment for the person doing the thing, but so that others see it and they don't do it.
Right.
And there is a certain amount. That's one of the reasons they justified the public executions, because they would put fear into people.
Yep.
But
They had I was reading Haunted Cleveland, I think it is. They had a story in there about the one guy, and they had a hangman's thing right outside Cobb County Courthouse near the annex, and they sat there and said guilty, slammed the gavel, and half an hour later he's just hanging in the wind.
I think they did public hangings in Akron one time too.
They did, yeah, same
I
thing.
forget when the last one, I remember reading an article about when the last one took place, but yeah, I mean, it's just it's still used in many countries. Saddam Hussein, remember, they hung him.
Mhm.
So, and one of the reasons they said that Hitler committed suicide was because he didn't want to end up like Mussolini. And remember, Mussolini was strung up from the land
Oh, yeah.
him and his
Well,
wife, I think it was.
They beat on him something fierce. didn't they?
Yeah. And he didn't want that happening to him, so he didn't
That's
tell him.
one.
Unless he escaped to South America, like some people say.
See, they're not saying don't use cocaine, they're just saying just make sure it doesn't have fentanyl.
And how do you know that?
The question is, how do you know?
Well,
I guess you gotta try.
true pass algorithm, if you die, then they did.
Well, I guess one could argue that the idea that they don't, but cocaine might, I guess the argument could be made that, well, if you can't tell that it doesn't, then you shouldn't do it at all.
Err on the side of caution? What a concept.
What a novel
They need to
concept.
spell
yes.
that out more clearly in some of these books.
What, how's that? Oh,
Well, and just that it's not just the fentanyl that kills, the opioids are bad enough. I'm not proud of their own. So, anyway, we're after 9 o'clock. We should go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, we do want to thank you again for things we can talk about here tonight. Father, just pray you would bless, watch over us as we lead her, keep us safe on the roads. Bless the day tomorrow for your glory, Lord, and bless the day Sunday. And just again, use us for your glory. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
There's a couple good abortions, so including two. Ones that you say abortion.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and sign off on there, so.
I like that one that talks about abortion being racist.
Don't-
That's
yeah,
a really
please.
powerful.